In this video, we're going to take a look at margins in Word 2019. I've got the Alice in Wonderland document open. We're on the title page, which really is not the page I want to be on to demonstrate some of this stuff. So we're going to slide down to the first page here. And now we've got some text that we can play with. And what we're going to look at is margins. Let's go to the Layout tab. And the leftmost button on the Layout tab is for margins. Let's click on the down arrow and see what our options are. We've got one that'll give us the last custom setting, but we're going to look at some of the other ones right now. Normal is what you get by default when you open up a Word document, and it's 1 inch all the way around. And if I want to set the margins to 1 inch all the way around, all I have to do is click on this, and that's what I'll get. And if I click down in my document here, you can see that I've got 1 inch of gray over here from 1 to 0, and over here from 6.5 to 7.5. So you have 1 inch margins all the way around. And there are some other options here, some default options. There's a narrow one. Right now it says we've got 57 pages in our document. If I change the margins to narrow, I should get a lot more space for my words. And down at the bottom it still says 57. I'm going to do a Control-N to go to the end of the document and see if that doesn't update my number of pages for me. And it's still saying 57. Okay, now it says I've got 47 out of 50, so it's reduced it by 7 pages. I'm going to go back to the beginning, do a Control-Home, and I don't want to be on the title page, so I'm going to do a page down here and then scroll down a little bit. Okay, so now we're back on the first page that has some actual text on it. Let's go back to our Layout tab. Let's go back to margins, and let's reset it to normal. Some other presets for you are moderate, which still gives you the same inch on the top and the bottom, but a little bit smaller margins on the left and the right. We've got wide, where you get larger margins on the left and the right of 2 inches. Mirrored, the Office 2003 default, which is going back a ways. And then we got custom margins down here. And it brings up the page setup dialog box, and there's a margins tab, and you can go in here and set the top and the bottom and the left and the right to whatever you want to set them to. There's a gutter here. The gutter allows a little bit of extra space either on the left side of the page or the right side of the page if you're doing front and back and you want to bind something. So it gives you a little bit of extra space for the binding. Okay, let's click on OK. And now let's take a look at the ruler up here. If you're in Print Layout View, which is the middle one down here in the lower right hand corner. If you're in Print Layout View, it's going to show you exactly what your document's going to look like on the page when you print it out. And you probably want to see the ruler up here at the top. So we've got a ruler here that has a couple of markers on it that are real important if you're talking about margins. Then we've got a vertical ruler over here on the side. If this is not visible, the way you can make it visible is by going to your View tab, and there's a checkbox there that'll turn the ruler on or off. So I'm going to turn it off and then back on again. And I'm also going to go back to the home page, or the home tab here, and we're going to click on paragraph mark so we can see all the hidden characters that are in our document, like paragraph marks at the end. Spaces are indicated by raised dots. If we had any tabs in here, which we don't up at the beginning anyway, tabs would be indicated by a horizontal arrow in the document. This is probably the best way to view your document, because if you can see the hidden characters, including things like page breaks and stuff like that, it will help you understand why your document looks the way that it looks. If you can't see those hidden characters, then you're just kind of guessing at why your document looks the way that it looks. Okay, now let's take a look at the markers that are up here. We've got one marker on this side, and by default, you know, these margin markers on the left will be where the gray meets the white, which is the margins that you have set for your entire document. And over here, the marker will be where the gray meets the white again. If you want to change a particular paragraph or part of your document, let's just take the first paragraph here. I'm going to click in the paragraph, and we're going to go up here to the right side, and there's a little marker here that looks like a house. That is the right margin mark, and if I slide that in ½ inch, it moves the margin for that paragraph in ½ inch. These markers affect an entire paragraph. You can't have different margins for part of a paragraph than for the rest of the paragraph. So these are commands that apply to the entire paragraph. So this increases my margin by 1/2 inch, and it decreases the amount of space I have for text by 1/2 inch. Okay, now I'm going to slide it back over to where it was before. Now on the left side, it looks like I've got 3 markers. I've got 1 marker on the top, and if you pause the mouse, it should say that this is the first line indent. And on the bottom, I've got a hanging indent symbol that's actually made up into 2 parts. And the first line up here just controls the first line indent of the paragraph. So I'm still in the first paragraph. That's the only one that's going to be affected by this. And if I drag this upside down house over 1/2 inch, then the first line is going to be indented 1/2 inch. If I drag it in a full inch, it's going to be indented a full inch. And let's drag it all the way back to the left edge where it was before. Now on the bottom down here, we've got a single marker that's divided up into 2 parts. And the top part looks like a house, and then we've got like what looks like a little basement underneath the house. And I'm just going to separate these for a minute by dragging this one back over about 1/2 inch. And this one, if I click on the top part, the house part, and drag it, it moves independently, and this controls the indentation of all the lines except for the first line. This first character that I had, this first symbol up here, indicates the indentation for the first line of the paragraph, and this one is the indentation for all the remaining lines of the paragraph. So you can slide them around independently. Now there's also a little what looks like a little basement under the house there, and that's called the left indent if you pause the mouse over it. And what happens if you click on that and drag it, get the tip of the arrow on it, and if you click and drag, let's try that again, then it moves both this marker and the first line indent marker, and it maintains the gap between them. So if there's 1/2 inch difference between them, as I move this back and forth, it maintains that separation. So click on the house if you want to move it independently, and click on the basement if you want to move both of those markers together at the same time. I'm going to move them back where they were before. So now all of my paragraphs look the same. These are paragraph margin or paragraph formatting commands. So if I have more than 1 paragraph selected, or even parts of more than 1 paragraph, in this case I don't have all the first paragraph, nor do I have all the third paragraph, but because I've got part of them, whatever paragraph formatting commands I do will apply to all 3 of them. So let's take the first line indent here and slide it in, and it moves in on all 3. Let's take the right margin indent and slide that in, and it moves in on all 3 of those as well, including the part that's not selected. Okay, let's move them back to their original locations. And the last thing I want to do is I want to look at some keyboard shortcuts for some of this. So there is a Control-M command. N stands for margin, I assume. Do a Control-M, and when you do, what it does is for whatever your selection is, in this case I was only in the first paragraph, it will increase your margin by 1/2 inch. If I do Control-M again, it will increase it by another 1/2 inch, and every time I do Control-M, it does it by 1/2 inch. And if I want to go back the other way, it's the same command but holding down the Shift key. So Control-Shift-M, and every time I do that, it moves back. The other keyboard shortcut for margins is Control-T. I'm going to do a Control-T once. And what that does is, instead of indenting all of it, it just indents all the lines except the first one. So you can get a hanging indent if you do a Control-T. And the way I remember this one, I'm not sure what T stands for, but the way I remember this one is that when you do this, the left edge here kind of looks like 2/3 of the letter T. So here's the left part of the crossbar, and if I do a little selection here, that's the vertical part of the T, and if I select that, I can't select it all once, but there's the top part of the T, and I've got the vertical part of the T. And so it kind of looks like a T after you do the indentation, so that's my little trick for remembering that. Every time I do a Control-T, I'm going to do another one and another one. It increases the indent level for all of the lines except the first one. And this one goes the other way, the same that the Control-M does. If I do Control-Shift-T, which I'm going to do right now, it moves those back to the left margin. So those are the basic things you can do to change margins in Word 2019.